Selling Manhattan by Carol Ann Duffy is a narrative about the complex issues behind colonization in America. It is about the deal that an Indian has made with a Dutch settler for the piece of land of Manhattan. The first stanza is actually from the point of view of the Dutch settler, but then the rest of the stanzas are from the voice of the Indian. So it really creates this contrast between the Dutch settler's way of life and the Indian's way of life. The poem really focuses on the Indian's emotional response to the settler's lack of respect for nature. Throughout the poem, the main concern of the Indian is nature, and that's detailed through Carol Ann Duffy's use of literary techniques. So to begin with, in the first stanza, right off the bat, the settler uses derogatory terms such as Injun and words that have the connotation of stupid or flimsy, such as gaudy, cloth, almost making fun of the Indians' way of life and how they traded these seemingly worthless things for an entire piece of land. It's also the perspective of the settler is emphasized by the use of italics. And then in the very last line, the settler uses the words, "Now get your red ass out of here," showing a very derogatory way of describing the Indian and really the perspective of the settler and how they feel about the Indians. So then right away you see a shift in the next stanza to another perspective because it's no longer in italics. And after reading a couple lines, it's a very different tone and mood of a focus on nature rather than choppy sentences speaking about the situation. The Indian starts this stanza by saying, "I wonder if the ground has anything to say," right away personifying the ground as having the ability to speak, which really shows the emotional connection that Indians had to nature and how much they valued it as a part of their life and as having the wisdom to tell them what was going on with this situation. In the next line, Duffy uses the alliteration of drunk and drowned out to really emphasize how much the double meaning of the Indians being literally drunk on alcohol or firewater, as alluded to in the first stanza, and figuratively drunk on all of these new ideas and experiences that the settler has brought into their life. And then in the next line, right away you see the world's slow truth with rapid lies, which is a strong antithesis in contrast of the speed of the rapid lies of the settlers and their rapid speaking, but really the truth only comes out after the Native Americans or Indians have made deals with the settlers and have spoken with the settlers. Only now is this Indian realizing what is truly going on in this situation and the settlers' lack of respect for nature. In the next line, the Indian uses his senses to really show how clearly the truth is speaking to him now and how clearly he realizes everything that's going on. And then uses an apostrophe once again, like in the second line where it says you, he uses in the last line, "You have touched the earth," speaking directly to the settler, saying that literally the earth, the connotation of sore, literally the earth is beaten down by these settlers, but also it is physically having the emotions of being hurt. And this personifies the emotional connection that the Indians feel. They feel that the earth is hurt. And then in the next stanza, there's the repetition of "I wonder if," the anaphora of "I wonder if." which really shows that this is still the Indian trying to figure out what is going on and trying to understand the reasoning behind these lies. And the Indian personifies once again nature by talking about water as if it has the ability of wisdom and spirit and ability to speak and tell him the truth. And uses an apostrophe again to speak to the settler, saying that the settler will poison it in the future, and he knows it. He knows that. That choppy sentence shows that the Indian has learned. He understands the truth now. And then in the last two lines, there's a lot of focus on music. I sing with the true love for the land. Dawn chant the song of the sunset, which is contrasted with this religion of the settlers, which would be a starlight psalm. Only the psalm was used by the settlers. And the alliteration and musicality of these words shows that the Indians feel the same way about nature as the settlers feel about their religion. They are equal. And it really shows how much nature means to them by comparing it to how much this religion means to the settlers. After this stanza, in the fourth stanza, there's a shift in tone from the Indian is no longer wondering, he knows. And it's almost his pleas now, his pleas for right in the beginning, it starts with a choppy sentence, trust your dreams. His wisdom is now coming out, and he's telling people what to do. He's no longer uncertain. In the second line, he says, my heart is on the ground as when my loved one fell back into my arms and died. This has a very interesting double meaning. Literally, his heart is with nature. It's on the ground of the earth. And it's also figuratively saddened. It's the emotional, it's no longer part of his body. He is separated from this emotional connection. And there's a double meaning in loved one. It could be both his literal fellow Indians that have been killed by the settlers, and it can be used as the people, as nature. Nature has died. So this is really he's learning now. He's certain about this truth that nature has died. He's given up. He starts using words that have the connotation of sadness, such as the solemn laws, sorrow, and then there's the imagery of between morning's frost and fireflies flash at night, showing that he has this emotional connection to nature, and it has told him the truth. Only nature could show him this truth about the settlers and their using of the land. Then in the fifth stanza, he starts asking questions, showing his certainty and his wisdom. He wants to give his advice now. He starts talking about the symbolism in the lengthen your shadow, showing that he believes that the settlers are power-hungry and greedy, but he knows that the sky is endless. Literally, the sky is endless, but symbolically, he knows that the settlers will never have enough. They'll always want more, and they'll always want more of the Indians' land and their life. And there's really no end. And this really shows how much the Indian has given up. And then he goes on to talk about a boy who feels his freedom vanish, using the simile like the salmon going mysteriously out to the sea. Once again, using nature, a nature simile, to portray how his own fellow Indians are losing their way because nature is no more. And nature itself is losing its way. It's vanishing. And then in there's a very interesting separation. All of the stanzas before were in quatrains, but this last stanza is separated into one line and a tetrane. So it really emphasizes this one line because it's separate. And he says, I will live in the ghost of grasshopper and buffalo. And this is very meaningful because in Indian symbolism, the grasshopper is symbolic of good tidings and good nature and good news. And the buffalo is symbolic of strength and stability. So that because they are ghosts, it really shows that they are no more. He's given up the best part of their life, the natural world, the good news is gone. It's disappearing. And then in the last stanza, he goes on to once again personify nature, saying that it's literally sad. He's accepted that it's sad. And in the last two lines, describes a little shadow running across the grass and disappearing into the darkening pines. And this could both be him talking about himself in third person, saying that he is that little shadow and he has disappeared because he no longer has that connection to the natural world. Or it could be nature itself, the buffalo, the grasshopper, becoming a shadow of its former self. It no longer has emotions or meaning to the settlers who will live there. And it is literally disappearing and becoming no more. So overall, the tone of this poem contrasts the situation of the settlers, their callous and derogatory nature towards the Indians, with the Indians' defeated and yet wise way of life and connection to nature that this Indian is trying to identify and show how his emotional connection to the natural world has been cut off by the settler.